Good afternoon, everyone. Today I have the pleasure to welcome at the Legal Matters podcast Mine Atli. Mine, welcome.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
Mine is a fellow lawyer. She's a Turkish Cypriot. She's the first female Turkish Cypriot leader of a political party, right? And she's an activist. She's a mother. And it's my pleasure today to have you here to discuss about Cyprus, about the developments in our island, and about the people of our island. I know that you took part in the Geneva talks, not in the official delegation, yes, but as a political
For some
party.
reason, they did not invite me to the official delegation.
They did not. So it was because of this that I invited you here, because I wanted to discuss with a Turkish Cypriot how they feel, what are their views about the Cyprus problem, where things are going, Turkey and so forth. So, and of course we can discuss all other things as well. I'm reading in the press that there is a headscarf crisis now.
I'm not sure if we start on that, if we'll have time for Geneva.
Yes, really. So tell me a little bit about it. What is the issue in a nutshell?
Sure. So as you know, the Turkish Cypriot society, I think the biggest difference between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots are Turkish Cypriots are very secular. Mustafa Kemal, Atatürk, secularism, these are very important taboos for Turkish Cypriots.
They are not like religious oriented.
They're not religious oriented. A lot of them are religious, so they have a deep relationship with God, but they do not want any state intervention, or they do not like to be told how to practice. And this is something that goes back all the way to the time of İrsen Küçük. You know, all Turkish Cypriot leaders unequivocally have been against any kind of religious indoctrination or anything like this. So in our schools, even though in Turkey, for example, for university students to be able to study with their headscarf, this was something that came with AKP. In Northern Cyprus, this was not banned for many years. But in our middle schools, primary schools, secondary schools, it is forbidden. It was forbidden, according to the statutes, for girls to wear headscarves in schools. Okay,
it was forbidden.
Forbidden, right? So when you go to university, it's fine, which is 17 in the Turkish Cypriot community. But any time before that, it's not allowed. It was not allowed in the statutes. And recently, the body responsible for education, they overnight decided they were going to change the statutes, and the Council of Ministers took a decision, and they passed this new statute which allowed this to happen.
Allows any girl under 17?
And of course the trade unions, the teachers' unions were adamantly against it, and they protested against it, and they went one step further, and they said we will not allow any children who come to school with their headscarves to come into the school. Most children, therefore, and families didn't want to put their children in the middle of this kind of heated debate and political discussion, so they did not send their children with headscarves. But one family in particular, motivated by the Turkish embassy and the AKP administration, and we know this because the men who are bringing her to school in black Vitos are also people who were very effective during the AKP campaign in Turkey and during the UBP, the general elections where they were supporting UBP pro-AKP stance. So we recognize them from the press, from their
so the embassy is behind this.
So the trade unions believe firmly that the embassy is behind it. And the debate is becoming incredibly heightened because there is a Turkish group, Turkish immigrant group, who call themselves the Rights and Freedom Platform, for example, which is an interesting paradox. And they're saying very far-right extremist statements saying, if you don't like it, you can go to the south. These trade unionists are pro-Greek, and if they're not happy with our Muslim state, they can go to... Which is very interesting, because they came and they feel like they have the right to tell us where to go. The sad thing is that children are stuck in the middle of it.
Yes.
I mean, this morning when I was watching the live broadcasts from the school where this was all happening, there was a 13-year-old girl with her headscarf, and I'm sure that what she thought she was doing is right.
Yes.
I don't have any queries about her motivation. I don't think she doesn't genuinely want to wear her headscarf. And she was there, and then there was a whole wall of teachers in front of her, not allowing her into her school, which is tragic. We don't want to see this. On the other side, on the other hand, what can the trade unions do? What can the teachers do? Because they're fighting against a huge power. They're using nationalist rhetoric. They're using easy rhetoric. It's really appealing to a lot of racist attitudes, which, as you know, is an easy style of politics anyway. It's a very popular, easy
and
style.
Populist.
Populist style. And children are being stuck in the crossfire, unfortunately.
Do you think they will get their way at the end?
No, I don't think the trade unions will back down. Also, as I said, Turkish Cypriots, whether right or left, whether pro-Turkey or not, whether federalist or two-state solutionists, they are secular. So I know that the teachers are being backed by very right-wing UBP people who have a strong alliance to their party and the right and to Turkey, but a stronger alliance to Mustafa Kemal and secularism. So it's a difficult one for them also.
So we are waiting to see what will happen with that. But it's a form of, would you say it's a form of Turkish intervention in the affairs of the community?
I would absolutely say it's the Turkish intervention. And that's why it's difficult for us to approach this as we would if we were, for example, if I was in the UK or if I was in any other European country that doesn't have to deal with what we are dealing with as Turkish Cypriots in relation to Turkey. I would probably approach it very differently. I would say that children should be able to wear their headscarves and families should allow their children, we shouldn't be aggressively against these families. I don't think it's an innocent issue of religious freedom. I think it's a direct attack from the Turkish administration to attack the Turkish Cypriot lifestyle. And it's not the first time. They've intervened in the content of books. You all know how the demography of the northern part of Cyprus has changed. And they have a lot of power and they have a lot of resources. We know that children, for example, are invited to Quran courses and offered bicycles and other incentives. The economic situation anyway is very difficult in the northern part of Cyprus for a lot of immigrants. And their children, for example, will finish school at 12 o'clock, but they will have to work until 6, 7 p.m. So the children and the state the administration doesn't offer any support for these children in the interim. So they're being looked after by Quran courses and people for free, of course, offered warm meals and all these other things. So it's very difficult to struggle against that one. And I don't think it's very easy to discuss or debate the issue based around the argument of freedoms. It would be ignoring the reality of what's going on in Cyprus, ignoring the reality of the Turkish intervention into the Turkish Cypriot community, and ignoring the fact that the AKP do not like, and what's happening in Turkey now is a good example of this, they do not like anybody that is different to them. And if it were up to them, we would be a homogenous Turkish society, not as Turkish Cypriot society, a Turkish society who identifies as Muslim, Sunni Turks.
So we started with this issue because it's something it was in the news today. But let's go a little bit back. Tell us about yourself. Tell me where were you born?
I was born in Cyprus, in Nicosia.
In Nicosia.
I grew up in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent.
Yes.
Or you could once upon a time. I don't know if you still can.
I think we can still tell. Yeah.
My little sister has Down syndrome, so my family chose to
It's
raise
two.
her there.
You have one sister.
I have an older sister,
Okay.
a niece and a nephew, and a younger sister. And
So when did you go to the UK? At what age?
I was two years old.
You were very young.
I was 2 years
Okay.
old. I always loved Cyprus. I always wanted to come back. I was the only one in the family who had these aspirations to come back and return to Cyprus.
Were you visiting Cyprus while in the UK in
Every
the summer?
year.
Okay.
Unrelentlessly.
Yes.
Every year, every summer, we would spend 6 weeks with my grandmother in her village in Lefke. My father was from Larnaca. I lost my father when I was very young.
Your mother, where is she from?
She's from Lefke, and my father's from Larnaca.
Okay.
So we would come back every summer, and then, long story short, I had to leave university in the UK where I was studying law and politics at Queen Mary. I had to come to Cyprus, and I had to study at university that was free because I didn't have any money. And
You came alone, right?
I came alone. And the only university that offered a free education on the entire island, north and south, was the University of Cyprus, Panepistimiou Kipru.
So you applied there?
I applied. I studied Angliki Philologia, English philology. I completed a 4-year degree where I have some very interesting stories as the only Turkish Cypriot at the university.
So how was it? How was it?
It was very
What time
lonely.
are we talking about? What year?
What year?
90s?
Count back.
90s,
Not
2000s?
90s. Come on. I'm not coming on this podcast
Okay.
again, just so you know.
I'm not very good at the maths. So 2010.
No, it wasn't the 90s. I was born in 1986.
2010,
I think.
yes.
Yes, around that time. I was the only Turkish Cypriot. I was the first Turkish Cypriot to graduate.
Really?
Yep. And
And it was in English, right?
it was all in English.
the
Obviously, all
course.
the electives were in Greek, or if I did some electives in the Turkish faculty, I could do them in Turkish. It was very lonely. It was very difficult.
How did the other students, the Greek Cypriots, see you?
It was very mixed. There was one percentage who hated me, who didn't like the fact that I was there.
They
didn't want to
hated
see
you. I
me.
mean, they displayed, they
They
showed this
displayed it very
vividly.
vividly. Very expressive, very articulate. I remember sitting once with somebody in the class who didn't like me, and he said, "Mina, you see that flag?" Pointing to the flag on the mountains, he said, "I hate that flag." And I said, "Look, I'm having to fight against the system under that flag. You can just look at it from far away." You know? So it was a very lonely experience.
A traumatic experience, would you say?
I wouldn't call it traumatic
Yeah.
because the professors were wonderful.
This is what I was going
The
to
lecturers
ask.
were great.
The-
There were some
the
that were not
teachers,
so great.
yeah.
But a lot of them were very supportive. Some of them I'm still in touch with now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the other percentage that would look at me like a trophy friend, you know? Or we have, invite the Turk along. You know?
Yes.
Look, I have a Turkish friend. I remember my first fiction class.
Okay.
You're taking me back to many years ago. Yes, you're right, many years ago. And I got the highest note in the class. It was my favorite lesson. And
Fiction.
Sure. And the teacher, I remember when she was announcing the results, she said, "Guess who got the highest mark?" You know?
Nobody could tell that it was you.
It was Mina.
Yeah.
Wow, look at this wonderful Turkish girl who got a high mark. You know? But that's no good.
Yeah. So were you considered by your classmates a Turk or
Absolutely.
a Turkish Cypriot?
Absolutely a Turk. Regardless of whether they were Prodeftigi or Protoporia, definitely I was a Turk.
Even Prodeftigi?
Absolutely. I was definitely different. The thing that hurt me the most was that even my progressive friends wouldn't want to cross over to the north. So I had a great friend who was an Australian Cypriot. I think she had one of her parents was from Greece as well, so she was also kind of people didn't like her either because she was
different.
Yeah. I had a few Cypriot friends. Generally, I think people liked me in my class. I don't think I was unpopular or disliked. But I didn't feel like a part of my class. And the most painful thing, as I said, was even my progressive friends wouldn't come to my home because they wouldn't want to cross over the checkpoint.
Yes.
And I understand completely on a political level them calling it katahomena, but it's a derogatory term talking about my home,
yes,
where I live,
yeah,
where I feel the safest and where I feel the most comfortable. The language issue was a huge barrier as well. And I was so hurt by the whole ordeal of everything being in Greek. And at the time, I couldn't speak a word of Greek and I couldn't read Greek.
Yeah.
Which has thankfully changed now, but then I couldn't. And I remember having to get 2 buses, doing a lot of walking to get to the university. And
so
then
you were telling me before that you were coming on foot every day?
Yeah, on foot and bus, public transport until the last year or something like that, where I got a Suzuki Swift, I think.
Yeah.
Cheap Suzuki Swift. But anyway, until that, so I would have to walk and do public transport, and then I got to university and it was closed because I didn't know that it was a public holiday.
Okay. Okay.
And I couldn't read the circulations and or the timetables or anything.
So you were living by yourself in Nicosia?
I was living by myself,
Yeah. And how did you support yourself?
I worked. I was working 3-4 part-time jobs. Yeah.
Yeah? What jobs?
I sold refrigerators and electrical appliances at Whirlpool.
Okay.
I was teaching English.
Okay.
I was doing translation.
So you had to support yourself, right?
And I was working at my NGO, doing some part-time work at my NGO that I'm still a volunteer at.
At that age, when you were a student at the university, did you develop any interest about politics?
Absolutely. I believed that I would be able to save the world, reunify the island. I don't know how far from that dream I am. The hope is still there.
This vision about reunification, how did it come about? I mean, what were the...
Look, I grew up in a very nationalist household.
Nationalist.
Very nationalist household. Diaspora, that's how they are normally. And then when I came to Cyprus to do some work experience for my secondary school, in the UK, when you're in secondary school, you have to do 2 weeks obligatory work experience. And I chose to do it with David Lammy, who voted yes for the Iraq war at the time. So, this 16-year-old idealist, I got angry at him and decided I'm not going to do work experience. He's a man who pro-war Labour MP. So I decided to come and do it in Cyprus. And I read all of the party programs. And I decided to go with the party that I'm still with now, Mustafa Akıncı's party.
Was Mr. Akıncı a leader at the time?
Absolutely, he was. And I was in love. It was. I was very impressed, both with him and with the president of the youth branch, who is now the mayor of Nicosia. And that's how it started for me.
Okay.
That's how it started.
Yes.
So I read all the programs. I chose my party, and it was a pro-reunification party, pro-peace.
So your mother, your family being nationalists, as you said, how did they... What did they feel about your direction?
Initially, there was some reaction, but eventually they're all on board now.
Yes,
they are all on board. Yes, my mother is a strong ally now, and one of my biggest supporters. And I have to, when people criticize me on Facebook, I think when people ask me, what was the hardest part of your leadership? Which, as a woman, thank you for the title, by the way, Turkish Cypriot woman. As a woman, I had a lot of complaints. But one of my hardest things was to control my mother, who, when people were criticizing me on Facebook, she was watching 24/7, and
she was like your protector.
I had like my campaign team sending me screenshots of my mother arguing with 79
She's still in
people.
The UK, right?
She's still in the UK. Yeah.
So
she goes back and forth.
When you finished the University of Cyprus, what did you do next?
I went to, which was always the plan, by the way. The plan was that I would save enough money to go and finish my law degree.
At Queen Mary?
At Queen Mary. By the time I raised the funds, I almost graduated from philology, so I thought I might as well graduate. I graduated, went back to City University because it was cheaper.
You got an LLB?
I got an LLB, and then I came back.
So you finished the degree and then straight back to Cyprus, and you started
I did
working?
my training with Emine Çolak. She's the former foreign secretary. She's like the Turkish Cypriot version of Erato Markouli.
Ah, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Also very impressive, intelligent, powerful woman.
Yes.
I did my training with her. And then I worked in a few jobs before I opened my own firm.
As a lawyer?
As a lawyer.
Yeah. And was it easy to start your own practice?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
It was terrifying. I had no savings. I had
No
no
capital?
I had no clients of my own.
Okay. And why did you do it then?
At the time, my partner of the law firm, my first practice, he was a judge and he quit. And so he was going to start the practice, and he said to me, "Why don't we do it together?" And I said, I can't. Like, I don't have any clients. I don't have any capital." And he said, "You're ridiculous, for not embarking on this."
Okay.
So I did, and it worked out well. I'm glad that I did. He then moved back to Canada. So
he left you the practice.
Well, we were partnering, but then it became very difficult to partner with someone who wasn't here. So we separated the offices. He's still a good friend, comrade also. We're in the same party, but we separated the offices.
So, okay. So now you started your own practice. Do you have any specialization in particular?
Yes. I mean, I won't go into my story, but it was a domestic violence story that brought me to Cyprus initially with my mother's husband. So I was very compassionate about women's rights and the safety and security of women. So my voluntary work was all relating to women. And when I became a lawyer, my dream was to become a good legal aid lawyer. And Mustafa Akıncı, who is the president of my organization, who's the wife of
Mr.
Akıncı, I remember she said to me, I said to her, "I'm going to become a legal aid lawyer." And she said, "First, we need to struggle for legal aid," because there was no legal aid then for women. So a woman could be raped by her husband every day. If she didn't have money in her pocket, even if she found a voluntary lawyer, she would not be able to access the family courts. So we had to change that. So we lobbied and advocated for legal aid. We gave legal aid to 100 women, the social support office and the police, and a lot of stakeholders were dependent on us as an organization to give legal aid. So when we cut it off, they had to sign a protocol. And the Bar Association and the Ministry of Social Security, they signed a protocol, and that's how legal aid started in the northern part of Cyprus. So because of the work that I did with women's rights and my NGO work, that naturally became my area. That's where the clients would hear me talking, and that's how they came. And I would say I'm one of the main divorce lawyers now in northern Cyprus.
You have many divorces?
I do, yes.
Yeah. And we were discussing before that all of us that do family law, we wish that we have more marriages because the higher probability for divorces, right?
And weddings are fun.
Yeah.
Weddings are fantastic.
From the statistics here, one every 3 weddings ends to a divorce.
Yeah,
it's about 33%.
It's a bit higher on the north.
It's a bit
45 and 50.
Yeah. The model of the family law in the Republic of Cyprus is, we had a new law in 1990, and it is based on the Greek, mostly, situation. In your part, it's the old...
It's a mixture.
It's a mixture with Turkish law and...
Yes, so it's a common law system.
Common law system.
So the family law comes from what it was in the Federation. And then there were huge changes in 1998, which made it closer to the Turkish system, but not exactly the same.
Yeah.
Still remnants of the Anglo-Saxon understanding.
Do you have consensual divorce?
We do have consensual divorce. That was brought in 2015. The amendment to the law was made in 2015, where we could have consensual, no-fault divorce.
Yes,
no fault. So up until 2015, you had to give a reason for divorce. In 2015, you can say, "I don't love him anymore," or "I don't love her anymore," which I have some problems with as a divorce lawyer, but that's a different issue. And it's precedent-led. So we have the body of the law, and then we have high court decisions that tell us, guide us on how the courts need to interpret the law.
Yeah. So
which I'm assuming is the same.
Yeah, it's a common law.
Yeah.
The doctrine of precedent, let's say, right? Yeah.
The doctrine of precedent presides, and the issue that we have is that sometimes the high courts will have a very European interpretation and direction, and you can see remnants of ECHR judgments and the idea of the Istanbul Protocol, where the primary focus of the court is to protect the rights of the woman in terms of safety and security. But sometimes in some judgments you can see the Turkish conservative approach to what a family should look like. I shouldn't call it Turkish conservative, actually. The conservative interpretation, which I know we find in Republic of ROC judgments as well.
The ECHR is applicable in the north.
We have a legislation which states that the ECHR, which recognizes the ECHR, the European Convention, as legislation. And then the Article 90 of the Constitution states that international treaties that have been ratified, whatever that means for you, in the Turkish Cypriot context, they are a part of the law, and they take they supersede.
They take precedent. Yes.
Local legislation. The problem that we have there is that sometimes the lack of awareness, or and not just in at the judges level. I mean, I'm talking about all service providers don't really provide the necessary victim support to be able to give EU level judgments, I think. So, for example, the EU directive for the protection of victims, the ROC has to follow meticulously, but we don't have that kind of burden as an administration. And so you can see the remnants of that in a judgment. So I'll give you an example, a concrete example. You can be an abuser, and we know that in a relationship, when it comes to abusive men, a perpetrator, they will use the children and they will undermine the mother, right? So if I'm being abused by my husband and my 9-year-old son, for example, wants to go to bed, and the mother says, right, it's time for bed. And the father says, no, let my king stay up a little bit more. You can imagine that scenario.
Yeah.
And then you ask the child, who do you want to stay with, your mother or your father? That child is likely to say the father, right? Because the father, the perpetrator, is the one with the strength, the money, the power, the control, and is the person that they see as a role model. So we can have judgments from the Turkish Cypriot courts where a court will identify that there was abuse in the relationship, identify that he was a perpetrator, and give her compensation for the violence that she suffered. But in the same verdict, will give the custody of the child to the father.
To the father. Okay.
Because according to the amendment made in 2015, a child older than 7 years old can decide which parent they go to.
Okay.
So their opinion takes precedent.
The opinion of the child.
The opinion of the child. And that's where the stakeholders and their approach is actually important, because the court will listen to social services, but social services doesn't have the necessary tools, knowledge, awareness, resources to be able to identify the abuse, provide the woman with the necessary support, and also give guidance to the court in that regard. So we have problems in those areas.
Yeah. Okay. So,
which I know you still have in the ROC as well,
Yeah.
because I follow ROC president. And
So you do primarily, as we said, family law, and then there is this interest in politics. How did you get involved in the political life?
So I told you how I became involved in the political life. I had to do work experience, and then I chose my party. And so I was always a member and a strong advocate for my party, and I was active in all of in the youth branch. And then
for our listeners that are not aware of the political system in the north, can you tell us which are the main parties?
Yes, we have the main right, the UBP, nationalist party, which at the moment it always has been, but now more than ever, it's 100% aligned with the AKP and the Turkish administration.
AKP is the party of Erdogan in
Yes,
Turkey.
Erdogan's party in Turkey. And then we have the main opposition, Tufan Erhman's party. And then...
which is called?
CHP. CHP, sorry. But maybe it's a Freudian slip that I said CHP, because they are, you can consider it as AKP and CHP in Turkey, and that's what they look like, right? Okay. And especially the CHP party leadership now as well. They're not, Tufan Erhman does not have the stance of Mustafa Akıncı when it comes to Turkey-Cyprus relations. He's aspiring for a more kind of peaceful relationship with the Turkish administration. Good luck to him. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Yes. I think Geneva showed us how that goes. Yes. If we have time to talk about it, we will.
Of course.
And then there are some other right-wing parties, and the main opposition to the opposition is the strongest left other than CHP is TDP, our party.
And it's a socialist party?
Social Democrat party.
Social Democrat party.
Okay. Social Democrat
party. So it's on the model of the Labour Party in the UK, for example?
Yes.
It's not a communist party like AKEL?
Yes, it's not a communist party like AKEL. Yeah, Social Democrats.
And how did you end up becoming a leader?
So I have always been active, as I said. And then there was a stage in the party where the party split into two. So the two social democratic parties emerged. Same ideology, just the leadership argued and they ended up separating. It's a very long story. I won't get into it. But anyway, we had two social democratic parties, two entities. And then after the Akıncı election and with the political aftermath and the disappointment and voter apathy and a really strong call to boycott the elections.
Yes. The elections took place in 2020, right?
Yes, 2020, the
when
presidential
Mr.
elections.
Akıncı lost,
yes. A little bit later we had, so in October was the presidential, and a little bit later we had the general elections. With all of these effects, our party remained under the threshold. So the leadership resigned.
It's 5%. Yes.
So the leadership resigned because it was the first time our party was under the threshold. The leadership resigned, and I didn't like the guy who was running for leadership.
Who was it?
His name is Doğay Yalçın.
Okay. So you ran against him?
I didn't think he was
the appropriate person.
The appropriate candidate.
Yes.
I didn't think he was good for the party. I didn't agree with the things that he was promising and his analysis of why we were under the threshold, so I ran against him.
And you won?
I won. Well, actually, the day of the elections, he resigned. He pulled back.
He pulled back? So you were elected without...
So I was elected without an election.
And your tenure was...
So he pulled out of the election the day of the election. So he came to the Congress and he pulled out that day. And I remember thinking, the first thing I was thinking was... Why didn't he do it the day before so the people who came from Iskele, Morfu, Leke, it was snowing in March, right? Okay. And the first thing I thought was these poor people paid money for petrol to come and they won't be able to vote. Okay. So that was my initial reaction. And then so I became, so it wasn't expected. It wasn't planned.
So how was the experience to be a party leader?
It was very difficult. It was a learning experience. I think I learned a lot from it. I definitely became more thick-skinned.
Is it something you enjoyed?
Not always.
Not always?
Not always. I felt, as a mother, a divorced mother, I felt a lot of guilt towards my son.
Because you didn't have time?
Because I felt like I wasn't dedicating the time that I should have. And I remember in my final departure speech, I was practicing at home and I was skipping the paragraph where I spoke about him and thanking him and apologizing to him. And at the actual Congress, I started to talk about him in the speech, which he knew off by. He probably could do the speech better than I could by the end of it. But then when I started to talk about him, he was very shocked and he was listening very intently. And then anyway, there was a standing ovation at the end. And then he came and he hugged me and he whispered into my ear, "I want to talk to you about your speech later." So in the car on the way home, he said to me, "Why did you resign? First of all, you didn't need to apologize to me because I don't feel like I was neglected. Okay. And secondly, why did you give this leadership up? It was the first time he asked this question to me.
Yeah.
And I said, I felt like I was neglecting you and it was really difficult. And I gave him all my reasons. He said, next time, don't make these decisions without consulting me. So that was surprising for me. So I had all of this guilt associated with feeling like I was neglecting him. But he told me, my, at the time, 6-year-old son, told me that he wasn't neglected.
He was fine.
He was fine.
And probably if you discussed it with him, you wouldn't have resigned.
I don't know. Maybe it might have had an influence, but it was very tiring. And the most tiring thing for me was, so I merged the two parties back together. That was my mandate. I said that if it were up to me, I would have got all of the other left smaller parties as well under one umbrella. That didn't work out. We had a lot of differing views. One of the biggest issues that we had was the immigrant issue. You would call them settlers. Yes. I call them immigrants. And that is a problem among left-wing parties in Cyprus because there are left-wing parties who boycott elections and who are adamantly against all what you would call and what they call settlers, right? I find this terminology incredibly offensive, and I would not be able
settlers
to,
terminology.
yes, and I would not be able to look into the face of people who I love and respect and who I consider to be my family if I called their families settlers or any term that has any kind of derogative connotation. So, we had some ideological differences with them, and it was impossible to merge us all under one umbrella. I would have loved to be successful in something like Syriza in Greece.
Yeah.
I was not. But one thing that I was able to do was to bring the two doves. Our logo was both a dove, one on red, one on blue. We brought the two doves together, and it's only one social democratic party now, and all the polls show that we will be passing the threshold. We no longer have a threshold problem. This, for example, that
will you run for parliament?
Absolutely.
When are the parliament elections?
In 2 years' time.
Okay.
Unless there's an early election.
Yeah.
There's an early election.
How many years were you leader?
2.
2 years.
Yes. 2.5.
Okay. During that time, I guess you had the opportunity to meet all the Turkish Cypriot leaders, all parts of the community and everything. Given your stance on the Cyprus issue, you are a pro-solution
yes. Person. I feel like it's the only feasible option for Cyprus.
Yeah. Do you get the same spirit from the rest of the Turkish Cypriot community?
No.
Is there isn't any will for solution? What is
I think that the will is eroding.
It's eroding.
And I think the Greek Cypriot community needs to step up to help rejuvenate that will.
How?
I think that the Turkish Cypriot community are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And we are constantly being told, the pro-federalists are constantly being told that the Greeks do not want a solution. Okay? Something needs to be done. So the how is there. Something needs to be done dramatically in the Greek Cypriot community to show Turkish Cypriots, especially those who've dedicated their lives to a reunification, that that's not the case. That they're happy to share the island in political equality, where Turkish Cypriots will not feel like they are the minority. And I don't think this is the case. I mean, I just told you about my experience at the Panepistimiou Kipro.
Yes.
And it wasn't an exciting, happy experience. Let me tell you this. And it could have killed my will for reunification. And a lot of children that graduate from these schools, like the English school, the grammar school, unfortunately, they share my sentiment when it comes to this. They go into these schools pro-solution, they come out very right-wing, and because they feel the discrimination in the schools. Sometimes my son now studies at the French school, and I'm very happy with the school. I love his environment. I think his teachers are great. The school administration, I think, is wonderful. Having to cross the checkpoint every day, sometimes the attitude of the officers,
the policemen,
the men and women,
yes,
is terrible. Like you approach somebody 6:30 a.m. in the morning with your child in the back seat, so there's not much you can say. And they are rude sometimes. Sometimes they're more than rude. And it's very difficult as somebody who's a federalist to deal with that, because you go back to your community, you're being accused of being Greek, of being a traitor, of being anti-Turk, right? So you're discriminated in your own community. And then you cross over to your republic under a flag that you consider should be your own, where you want to feel a part of it. You want to feel safe under it.
Is this how you feel?
No, I don't feel safe or secure.
No, I mean when you see the flag or when you come to the free side, do you think that it's something that you could be part of?
Absolutely. But when I am exposed to discrimination, if I go to a bank, for example, I mean, I have Greek Cypriot clients. I have had projects where I've had Greek Cypriot, so ROC paid income. I studied in the Republic. My son studies in the Republic. I can't open a bank account, for example.
You can't?
I cannot open
Why?
a bank account because I don't have an address in the ROC.
Okay.
Right? I would have to rent somewhere. And you know, it seems like such a minor thing to not have a bank account.
Yeah.
But it's a huge
It's a huge thing,
right?
yeah.
A very little example. If I forget, for example, to give my son, they've changed the system at the school recently, but there was a time where if I forgot to charge my son's school card, his canteen card, there is no way that I can transfer money into that account online, right? So this is something that you would not even think twice about, but I can't do it. The Gesti system for me is inaccessible. I have no idea it's Turkish Cypriot. If something happened to forget me, I'll manage. If something happened to my son at school, I have no idea.
Do you have a Cyprus passport?
Of course, yes.
So you are not entitled
for me,
to Yesi?
It's inaccessible to me. I do not know what the process is. I don't know how the registration is. There has been no incentive to explain it to me as a Turkish-speaking Cypriot, as somebody who can now read and write Greek, who understands some Greek, who crosses every day. I have no idea how to access the system.
So you come...
so if I have no idea, God knows how many others Cypriots feel.
You come in the morning to get your son to the school and then you come in the afternoon
No,
to
his father and I, we share that.
You share the routes? Okay. But it's every day, right?
Every day, sure.
Yeah. What is the situation at the school? Does your son have any problem at the school, or he's well received? Or
well, the French school is a very multicultural school, so he's the only Turkish Cypriot, but there aren't many Greek Cypriots in the class either. So there are a lot of Lebanese children, Russian children, Iranian children. It's a mixture.
You told me before that the Greek Cypriots should step up.
Yeah.
One of the problems of the Greek Cypriots, and one of the obstacles towards a solution, as you may know, is the presence of the army here, of the Turkish army. And we feel threatened by this situation. What do you think about this?
I think that, for example, the Annan plan, it had a solution for that. So, first of all, we cannot oversee a fear. Right, so the Turkish Cypriot community have the same fear when it comes to Turkish guarantorship. Turkish Cypriots, the majority of Turkish Cypriots, want to have Turkey as a guarantor power because they feel through their experiences and through the
it's the only way to feel safe.
It's their only way to feel safe for them.
Yeah,
just like we cannot override that fear and we cannot ignore it.
But the fear of the Turkish Cypriots is that the Greek Cypriots will do something to them.
I mean, for some it's that. For some they feel like the Greek Cypriots will. For some they say that we cannot trust the international conjecture and they can decide anything overnight and, it could be decided that they're going to be wiped out.
So we need Turkish guarantees in order to feel safe.
At the same time, I understand the Greek Cypriot fear of the Turkish military remaining.
Yeah.
But as I said, I mean, there are solutions to this. The clearest solution to me and the most feasible solution, which was a solution in the Annan plan, was that they would be phased out eventually. So by now, there would not have been a single Turkish soldier on the island if we had said yes to the Annan plan.
You think so?
Well, that's what the plan said.
Yes, on paper.
On paper. So, I mean, that's all we have, right?
Yes, but
if you're saying yes to a solution,
another issue for the Greek side.
But look what happened now.
What?
20 years after the no.
Yes.
there are still 40, maybe more, 40,000, if not more, soldiers on the island. And also the demography of the island is changing. And it's becoming, look, in 2020, when we had the presidential elections, the Turkish embassy was in the elections with their hand and feet.
They wanted Tatar to be...
They wanted Tatar to be...
Akıncı out.
They wanted Akıncı out, Tatar in. Tatar is the puppet of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of AKP. He has no individual thought. And if he does, he's hiding it extremely well. He says whatever the Turkish rhetoric is, whatever Hakan Fidan says, whatever Recep Tayyip Erdogan says, this is what Ersin Tatar and his team say. Okay? They do not step out of it even slightly, ever.
Yes. He's dedicated to the Turkey idea.
Absolutely. He just mirrors what's being said. And you can see this, I mean, I think in international circles as well, it's no longer an issue between Ersin Tatar and Christodouloulis. It was between Hakan Fidan and Christodouloulis. So we've lost our agency, with Ersin Tatar. The Turkish embassy were in our elections with their hands and their feet. As I said, we published a report on how they intervened. So we don't have time to talk about exactly the methods that they used, every single one of them, but it's all written in English and Greek as well. They
terrified people, they gave incentives.
There were incentives given, there were threats, people were given financial incentives, incentives regarding employment.
And this was centrally directed by Turkey,
orders,
you think?
They were giving orders. The embassy was used as Ersin Tatar's headquarters, okay? And the PR team of Ersin Tatar was AKP's PR team.
Okay.
One of our journalists, Pınar Barot, the owner and editor of Özgür Gazete, which directly translates to Free Press, she set up her camera on top of an apartment overseeing the hotel where Ersin Tatar and AKP's PR team were working together.
Okay.
She was on the roof for a week.
Okay. And she was
photographing.
Yeah.
Okay. And she published this on her tabloid. And then Ersin Tatar said that she was a traitor and she was being paid by foreign spies to leak wrong information. So we sued him for defamation.
Yes.
And we won.
Yes. I've read about it.
So
he paid compensation?
Yes, we dedicated it to the shelter, the animal shelter. And I donated my fees to her paper. But the issue, what I'm saying is that we reported as Turkish Cypriot progressive federalists who are trying to minimize citizenships that are being given, that are being falsely given, who are trying to fight against AKP's stance, them trying to indoctrinate our children and giving all of these fights, struggles, whether it be legally, politically, and we pay the price for this. A lot of us, for example, my child's father, he cannot travel to Turkey.
Why? He's on a list?
He's on a list. He's on a security list.
He's considered an enemy of
He's considered a security threat to Turkey. I thought I was on the list
you,
for many
You were
years.
on the list as well, right?
I thought I was, but I was not.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was that? The case that they took you to court for?
Yes, so that's another issue, but I'll tell you about that case in a minute. But just to finish what I was saying, so there is a Turkish Cypriot community who's struggling for this reunification. Okay, and then when we are met with right-wing rhetoric from the Cypriot press, it really brings us down. It pulls us into a space that's very difficult to climb out of. Because what is your solution that you present to, as a political party? It is your duty to present a solution to the public, to your electorate, right? What can I say to my electorate if the Greek Cypriot community are constantly voting for people who are not sitting down and discussing a solution and things like this, who are against any kind of federation, who, Elam is strengthening. What do I say to my electorate as a solution? It's easy for the right wing because their solution is Turkey.
Yes.
And their solution is 2 states.
Is it up to the Greek Cypriots
To elect
not to elect
people that are pro-solution? Yes.
Yes, but look, the majority of the Greek Cypriot parties support the solution. Like if you take AKEL and DC, which are more than 50% or near 50% anyway, they are pro-solution. The goal is supporting by zonal, by communal federation, at least in theory. So there is a majority. The question is what each of us understands when we say by zonal, by communal federation, which everybody understands different things, and that's a huge problem, as you know. But the question is, the key for the solution isn't in the hands of Turkey. At least this is what we believe. That if Turkey wants...
I strongly believe that, for example, think of when we had Crans-Montana and then Berlin. Did Turkey want a solution during Crans-Montana? Turkey was cornered into having to want a solution. And Anastasia, this gave Turkey something that Turkey could not get with a leader like Akıncı. Turkey was stuck. What could it do? Say that, no, we don't want a solution, when the Turkish Cypriot leader was saying, no, you have to sit down and we have to... When I look at the convergences that came out of Crans-Montana, I feel so frustrated. You know, in Guterres' report, he says, I can see the finish. He uses this terminology. He says, I can see the finish line.
Yes.
There's 100 meters left. And when you look at
what did Anastasiadis give?
By walking away from the table, he gave Turkey a ticket out of the solution process.
He took them out of the corner, you mean?
He took them out of the corner completely. He saved Turkey.
Well, he says, the ex-president says that Turkey wouldn't give up the guarantees and they wouldn't agree on a sunset clause.
If the 2 Cypriot leaders agreed, and they agreed on something where even the guaranteeship, for example, what does it mean to be a guarantor, for example? This could have been discussed. The discretion of guarantor powers could have been reduced. Also, the powers could have been phased out in time.
Yes.
Education programs, all of these things, phasing out security measures.
Yes, but
extra security measures to if one side didn't get up from the table and leave, and Crans-Montana turned into another summit, and we had something also to push for.
There was a momentum,
Mustafa Akıncı, who Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the day after his elections, Recep Tayyip Erdogan went on national TV and he said, this leader, he needs to listen to what's coming out of his mouth. He said, we're not your brother state. Because this was the terminology that Akıncı placed in, the Mustafa Akıncı placed in Turkish Cypriot terminology. That even right-wing press started to use this terminology, that Turkey and North Cyprus were brother states, brother or sister. We have only one word in Turkish.
The thing is, I mean, whatever is agreed, our fear is that Turkey won't go by it and they won't honor their signature. I mean, look what happens now with Imamoglu. We were discussing this before as well. You see this situation developing in front of our eyes. Why would you trust such a regime?
What's the alternative? This status quo, what does it mean for Turkey?
You tell me.
If I was in Turkey's position with this conjecture where we leave Geneva, the Greek Cypriot leadership is happy. Turkish Cypriot leadership is happy. Greece is happy. General Secretary is happy. Turkey is happy.
Yeah, everybody's happy.
Why would they sit down and spend hours and pressure and international pressure and all these things with their teams to draft a solution? Why? And what's going on now?
I think
in practice, Turkey
yes.
is directing all of our affairs, not even our regular political affairs. They are even intervening in the general council of the right-wing parties. So the right-wing party, UBP, cannot even elect their own leader at the moment. Turkey is saying to them, come here. You withdraw from the race.
Yes.
You, I don't like you, stand back. You're okay. You're going to get elected. And that's how it's working at the moment.
Yes.
This is how ministers are being appointed. This is how council of ministers are being formed. This is how leadership is happening.
So there is total dominance. This is what you are
if
telling
this
me.
is the situation,
Yes.
and they're giving citizenship based on who they want to give citizenship to. So if you're born in Southeast Turkey, and it's likely that you're not going to vote AKP in Turkey, you don't get TRNC citizenship.
There is this.
Of course,
okay.
I have clients who we've applied for judicial review that have not been granted TRNC citizenship despite working in the TRNC for 20, 30, 35 years, residing. Everything fine, but they have a security flag, and so they're not being given citizenship. Right? So they're designing the demography.
Yeah.
They're trying to infiltrate our schools, trying to infiltrate our education system, trying to really attack everything that we believe in strongly and everything that distinguishes us as Cypriots. They're trying to attack, and I'm not sure how far we'll be able to resist. So what's the alternative if we can't? What's the alternative if my son, who now speaks French like his mother tongue, English like his mother tongue, Turkish fluently, a little bit of Greek, if my son decides that he doesn't want a future in Cyprus and he leaves, but a family in Turkey believe that Cyprus is a better option for them and they keep moving into North Cyprus, what happens to North Cyprus? I mean, so the Greek Cypriot position of we can't trust Turkey, you trust them now? It's okay what they're doing now? They will permanently become your next door. This is what the status quo is. And I'm terrified of what the future holds for Turkish Cypriots and how strong we will be able to continue resisting. Today we had to send teachers to stand in front of the school gates, and a child was trying to enter the school and there were 2 rows of teachers stopping the child from entering the school. If this happened anywhere in Europe, I would go crazy. But here I am as a pro-human rights activist, saying the teachers had no other choice. But how sustainable is that? How sustainable is that level of argument? So that case that you were talking about is a good example as well of how much we can persevere. I was prosecuted, not in a civil case, in a criminal case, because in the Turkish Cypriot constitution, it says that the president has to be neutral and independent politically. And they swear on their honor and integrity. So when the president went to the UBP party general conference, I took a picture of that and I posted it on Facebook, and I also quoted the constitution. And these things that he swore on, his pride and integrity, these things, I said he didn't have these things, his honor and integrity. I said he was dishonorable and he didn't have any integrity. So I was prosecuted for up to 5 years imprisonment. Right.
For insulting the
For insulting the leader of the state.
Yes.
Okay. Now, ECHR judgments, the constitution, blah, blah. I probably would have been let off free in the case, but I would have been detained throughout my trial. I could have been detained for 6 months, maybe up to a year.
Yes.
We did a remand trial. The prosecution was asking that I couldn't leave the country. Can you imagine what it means for me to not be able to leave the TRNC? I would not have been able to see my family for years. I would not have been able to take my child to school, pick him up from school, go to his school concerts.
Yeah.
And that's what I was facing at that time.
Yeah.
These are the burdens that we have to face. These are the struggles that we give. And these are the sacrifices that we have to make on a personal, financial, political, all these things. If I was a little bit softer in my terminology against Turkey, I would have been an MP. I have never been elected as an MP. The only thing I've ever been elected to is a council member
of Nicosia.
Yeah. And that's how we were able to set up the shelter and ban the nightclubs and things like this. That's the only power I've had politically ever in my life. I've never been elected as an MP. If I was in Cetepe, a little bit softer towards Turkey, a little bit softer in my stance towards Turkey, I would have been elected a long time ago. So we pay a price, and we want to have more allies. And the biggest indicator of having a community that allies with you is a community that does not allow for fascist extremism like Elam to increase their votes. When Elam increases their votes, my votes decrease directly.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes. Is there real democracy in the northern part? I mean, is it like I don't know if you can compare it with the Republic side. There is freedom of
Let me give you an example. I just told you a story of what our freedom of speech looks like.
Yes.
I was prosecuted. My child's father was also prosecuted. Yes. He was lucky. He had me as a lawyer. So yeah. He was fine. Look, I gave you an outline of what freedom of speech looks like. But when it comes to democracy, this is what we face. Okay. So as I said, there are immigrants who I consider to be Cypriots. They feel Cypriot. They were born here. Their children are born here. They do not affiliate with any other country and they identify as Cyprus. Cyprus is home for these people. Okay. But I will go to a village where I'm campaigning and I will convince some of them, especially the women. I've been working with women for 20 years. And then somebody will go from the embassy to that village and talk to them about me and say, if she had her way, you would all be put on a boat and sent to Turkey overnight. Yeah. Even if you thought that I was charismatic and intelligent and sincere in what I was saying, would you vote for me if you were threatened with being put on a boat and sent back to your country? Yeah. That's the dilemma that we have with democracy.
Yeah.
I don't believe that every immigrant that comes to North Cyprus is in a homogenous way of thinking. I don't think they are all controlled by the embassy. But the 2020 elections showed us that when it comes to the crunch, when they have to choose between what's best for Cyprus and what Turkey says is best for them in terms of security,
they follow the latter. Yeah. So you also went to Geneva. Yes. What can you tell me about your experience? Was it the first time that you
Yes, it was the first
participated in an international...
At this level. It was the first time I went to
How many Turkish Cypriots escorted Tatar?
I don't know what the size of the official delegation was. I know it was smaller than the Greek Cypriot delegation, but it was, it was a smart, intelligent group of people. I cannot say that they have the same
ideology.
No, they have the same, not same ideology as me, of course. I don't think that they have the same puppet-like characteristic that Ersin Tatar has. They believed in this two-state solution. And then there was us. There was the opposition, and then we were in informal environments. So when we came out of the informal meeting,
with whom was the informal meeting?
Hakan Fidan, Ersin Tatar, and the right-wing and left-wing political party leaderships. My delegation, I was with Mehmet Harmancı, the mayor of Nicosia, who's also a member of my party. When I came out of the meeting, Ersin Tatar, who, as you know, he's sued me before.
Yes.
I've sued him before. We had a little bit of a chat before we went as well. And he came out of the meeting and he said, "How are you, Mina?" And I said, I had less pain when I was giving birth than I did watching this meeting. My observations from Geneva are that we are in the most tragic state other than immediately after the war, right? We are in the most tragic state now than we have ever been in terms of Cypriot history, because we are being pulled into this environment where the UN General Secretary says there's no common ground, but we're still celebrating it as a success. I'm looking at CTP and I'm looking at the Greek Cypriot parties, all of them, including Akel. Other than Volt, I'll say that Volt had a better, deeper and more accurate analysis of what happened. But other than them, the general consensus is that things are going in the right direction. 1 minute. There are no negotiations. There is no meaningful negotiation process going on. Even at the time when Erol was the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community, who was also very right-wing, we were discussing UN resolutions, bicommunal, bizonal, federal Cyprus, and the convergences were being developed based on this framework.
Yeah.
Now this is not the case. And we should be, everyone other than those that were in that meeting, should be screaming and shouting at this is not what we as Cypriots need to settle for. We go to a summit where the entire world has their eyes on us. We're in Geneva. We're in front of the Secretary General of the UN. And we're talking about cleaning cemeteries. What happened?
What happened was that Turkey went a step back and wants a two-state solution, isn't it?
But why is everybody else accepting this as a new page?
Who is everybody else?
The Greek Cypriot side, the Turkish Cypriot opposition, those of us who can see what Turkey's stance is.
The Greek Cypriot side doesn't accept it, but what options do we have? I mean, we're trying to reverse this position.
The option that the Greek Cypriot side has is to increase the dialogue with Turkish Cypriot opposition, like my party, like CHP, anybody in Northern Cyprus, any sports club or dance club or choir or NGO, anybody that promotes a solution. The Republic of Cyprus administration needs to be making direct contact with civil society. Obviously, I'm not talking about state or municipal.
And
apart
say
from
what?
the Nicosia.
Like say we're...
What can we do? Okay, the solution process has stopped. What can we do to enhance the peace process? Because if the solution process might have halted and it might be dead because of what Turkey wants, because of what the Turkish Cypriot side wants. It could be because Anastasiadis walked away from the table. We could play the blame game or we could not. But for multiple reasons, the negotiation process has stopped. The solution process has stopped, has halted. Let's talk about what we can do about the peace process. Let's talk about CBMs. Let's talk to the Cypriot communities about confidence-building measures that can affect the lives of Turkish Cypriots. But let's talk about issues like the citizenship issue, for example, of the Republic of Cyprus. This is a huge CBM, I think, that should happen, that we need to be discussing, right? So imagine you're born as a Cypriot, you're born in Cyprus, both parents immigrants, raised in Cyprus, your children are Cypriot, were born in Cyprus. The only place you feel like is home is Cyprus. But the ROC says to you, you and your children, we will never give you ROC citizenship. Where are you going to turn to? You cannot study in Europe. You cannot study in an ROC university. Where are these children going to study? Either in the TRNC universities, which we'll need a whole other podcast to talk about the situation there, or Turkey. So what happens to these children who are genuine about wanting the welfare of Cyprus and who genuinely feel Cypriot?
Yeah.
What happens when they go to Turkey and they study?
They will adopt the Turkish position, right?
Why should they adopt a policy or be pro-solution with these people who are saying to them, you are not a Cypriot? I understand that the ROC is against giving citizenship to people who, have only been here for 5 years, 10 years, whatever. They can even maybe go one step further and look at the political orientation of these people. That would have a lot of human rights issues and a lot of discrimination issues, which have a lot of depth, okay? But even there, I'm more open to the idea. But the stance of the ROC on this issue now, and imagine what it means for Turkish Cypriot progressive people who say to Turkey, you need to get out of Cyprus. Turkey blocked them from coming into the country, right?
Yeah.
So my child's father, for example, he can't go to Turkey. Imagine if he also didn't have ROC citizenship. He'd be trapped. And there are hundreds of people in this situation in Northern Cyprus. They protest against Turkey. They stand up against Turkey. They say, respect me as a Cypriot. Turkey says, okay, you're not allowed into my country anymore. You're a security threat to me. The ROC says, you're not allowed to fly out of my country because you're not an ROC citizen. And I won't give you not even any travel documents. There have been families that have tried to apply for travel documents. Then they have been denied by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the ROC. Even things like travel documents. So they're stuck in Cyprus like an open-air prison. Where do we go from there?
The people in the Turkish Cypriot community that are in favor of a two-state solution What advantages do they see in this solution, and they are in favor of it? Does this
Every
two-state
single
solution?
advantage that you can think of.
What?
If they support two-state solution,
Doesn't
then the state in the TRNC, who also supports a two-state solution, will open their arms to them, invite them in, give them jobs,
yes,
give them rank within their jobs, because we have promotions and things like this.
Yes.
They're safe to go to Turkey whenever they want because they're not
a threat.
They're not a threat. Well, no, none of us are. I'm not a threat. Look,
Yeah.
I thought I wasn't allowed to go to Turkey. And I remember at that time, there was an earthquake in Turkey, and I was crying watching these TV coverage of the earthquake. I was crying because I was so sad about
this
the
tragedy.
security and the threats to the lives of Turkey and Turkish nationals. And on the other hand, I was under the assumption that I was not allowed into Turkey because I was a threat. That's the paradox that we have there.
Yeah.
So they have everything in their favor. And what do you have as a Turkish Cypriot who supports Zonal Federal Cyprus and tells Turkey that they need to leave with their military and they don't want Turkey to intervene in their affairs? They get prosecuted. I'm giving you my story.
Yeah.
They get prosecuted. They have the threat of not being able to enter Turkey. Absolutely no chance for any kind of government job, not only for them, but also for their children. Thankfully, I don't need a civil office job, but this, may not be the case for everybody. I don't get elected because, on the one hand, I'm saying that we need a bicameral Federal Cyprus and Turkey needs to take a step back. On the other hand, I'm saying that if somebody was born in Cyprus and they feel Cypriot, then they should be able to be Cypriot. So the far left don't like me and they don't want to vote for me.
Yeah.
I recently posted about this headscarf crisis.
Yes.
And my post read something like this. I said, I'm sorry. I apologize to the girl, this 13-year-old girl. I said, I'm sorry that we couldn't stop this administration who was using you as a pawn. I'm sorry that you had to go to your school where your friends are and your classroom is and you couldn't walk in because there was a wall of these people who were the people that you should trust the most, your teachers. I'm sorry that we couldn't stop this politics that put you amidst this fire, And you have so-called left-wing Turkish Cypriots insulting me. Saying, you should be apologizing to our children. Me, Mina Atli, who's been dedicated her entire life to trying to make this Cyprus a better place for especially women and children to live, have been told by a left-wing pro-solution woman that I need to apologize to her children. Why? Because I apologize to this immigrant child.
Yeah.
And from day one, I was supporting the trade unions. I was supporting their protest. I went to the protest. I was stood right behind the head of the trade union. I made it very clear which side I was on from day one. And despite that, the people who should normally would be if I made a very easy populist statement like they should all get out and we don't want to see any of them, they would all vote for me. Because I took the human rights approach there.
Yeah. Do you think...
So what's my benefit in all of this?
None.
Yeah.
If any Hurman is elected in October, do you think things may change? Or will it be just the rhetoric? What is your political assessment?
Look, that's a very difficult question because I don't want to go as far as to say that Tufan Erman is the same as Ersin Tatar. Okay, he's not.
He's not.
First of all, he's a law professor. He, I don't know if he has the title professor, but he definitely
he's an academic.
He's an academic. He definitely has more than a PhD. He knows, he has published books on federation. And he supports federation. So I cannot say that he's the same as Ersin Tatar and whatever happens with whatever Turkey wants, that will happen. I cannot say this, but unless there is a strong opposition to Tufan Erman that will remind him why he's there, I am concerned that sometimes his so-called more peaceful approach could just become a subservient stance. And that worries me.
Yeah. Does he have a chance to get elected?
If he convinces us that he will stand strong and he will maintain that Turkish Cypriots are the subject of the conversation and not just that we have some kind of agency and we support him fully, then we have a chance. Yes. Because he can get the middle vote as well.
Yeah. In our community, there is this idea that if Turkey wants to move position in the Cyprus problem, they can get Enhurman elected. But if Turkey will stay on the two-state solution path, then they will get Tatar re-elected.
I don't think that Turkey will intervene in this election as much as they did in 2020.
Really?
Because I don't think that the gap between Erhürman and Tatar
is
as big as it was with Akıncı and Tatar.
Okay.
I don't think that Tufan Erhürman will be able to oppose Turkey's position to the extent that Akıncı did. I'm not sure if I finished that anecdote when Erdogan said about Akıncı, because he was using this brother-sister rhetoric.
Yes.
The day after he was elected, he said, does he hear what's coming out of his mouth? And Akıncı said, not only do I hear it with my ears, but I hear it with my heart, right? I don't understand. I'm not sure if you as Greek Cypriots understand what that meant in international politics as a Turkish Cypriot leader to say to stand up against the Turkish leader and say, no, I heard.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I think we understand and,
and
we appreciate.
I was terrified for his life. His wife and his
but they got rid of him eventually.
Are like my family.
Come near to the microphone.
They're like my family, and I was terrified for their lives.
Yeah.
I went to the 20th of July celebration because I was worried that he could have got shot. I wanted to be close. You understand what it means as a Turkish Cypriot that supports the federation, what it means, what Akıncı did. Now, yes, they got rid of him, but one thing I can say, and I published I was one of the 6 members of the team who published a report on the interventions. Yes, there were interventions, but if we had the same commitment that the Cypriots showed in 2014, 15, I don't remember. I know that was delayed because of COVID, but I don't remember if it was 2014 or 15. But the first election of Akıncı, if we had the same volunteers, the same will, the same drive that we did pre-Crans Montana, then Turkey, despite its interventions, wouldn't have been able to. They were in their elections with their hands and their feet, and they won with 4,000 votes.
Yeah.
So if we still had our volunteers in the villages, if we still had that will, if we still had the belief that there could have been a solution, if Anastasia didn't overturn the table, then we still would have been able to re-elect Akıncı despite the Turkish intervention. And I strongly believe this. Yeah. I'm not just saying this because I'm trying to pump false hope.
Could Anastasiadis do something to assist Akıncı re-elected? I mean,
of course,
do a move, a political move.
Here's I made a mistake. Come back to the table. Come back to the table.
You think he did not do anything on purpose?
No. I think I saw. I was there.
Where were you?
I was very close to the presidency during Akıncı's term. I wasn't an official because I had my own firm.
During Crans Montana?
During Crans Montana and Berlin. I was very close. So I saw what the atmosphere was. I saw what Akıncı was willing to do. And he would have been very happy to go back to another process that could have ended differently. And if one thing also I can say, again, believing it, if it was Turkey that was responsible, Akıncı would have said it.
You think so?
He would have said it. I'm sure.
Mine, as a Turkish Cypriot, you read, I guess, what happens in Turkey every day from the portals, the websites and everything. Is the Cyprus issue a matter that is in the agenda of the Turkish political discussions every day, or is it something that comes up every 6 months.
It depends. We have polls that show us this, okay? Perception polls. And we ask our electorate or potential electorate, we say, how much of a priority is the Cyprus problem for you? If there is a live process, if it's a tangible objective, that...
It spikes.
It spikes.
Yes.
Right?
So if we have
if it's
discussions,
not, and people are trying to fight the Turkish inflation with their wage, and they're trying to live, and it's not on the agenda, then why should it be on the agenda of the Turkish Cypriots? If it's important that we understand that if there is a live solution process or peace process, that's what I'm saying, the peace process and the solution process need to be separated. And it's down to the ROC to do this. If there is an active, vibrant peace process or solution process, so things are going on, CBMs are moving around. Look, I travel all around the world and my phone works everywhere. When I take my son to school, my phone doesn't work. If I have an accident on the way there was a car accident on the way to pick my son up, I couldn't call anyone on the north. I couldn't call my child's school. Such a basic issue. For you, this is a peripheral issue.
Yeah.
You might think, what is this crazy woman doing talking about her phone working on a program like this? But these are real life issues. Your phone not working.
Yes.
Not being able to IBAN money to somebody.
Yes.
Not being able to access the hospital. All of these issues are integral to just being able to live. Right, our daily lives. So if there is a process where these things are being resolved, then the Cyprus issue
will become easier
will become on the agenda of Turkish Cypriots. But if there is nothing going on to change my quality of life and there is no prospect for a solution, and we leave an international summit where everybody's happy, even though we're not talking about a solution, why should it be on the agenda of a Turkish Cypriot?
Yeah. From your perspective, when we say political equality, what do you understand?
Not being a minority in my own country. So what this means is, by number, I can be less.
Yes.
But this is how I always explain it. I will not be able to look in my son's face if I say yes to a solution where one day he would not be able to be president because he's Turkish. This is what I mean by political equality.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a mechanism where my son has the same opportunities that your son has. And they're not discriminated because of the sect that their parents were a part of 100 years ago.
Yes. What about this with the demand for every, in all decision-making bodies, at least one Turkish Cypriot must agree?
It's the security blanket that you need. You understand? Like, when I was studying at the University of Cyprus, I had one of my negative experiences was with my phonetics teacher.
Phonetics.
Phonetics.
Yes.
And you understand that I was in a group of Cypriots who had a very strong Cypriot accent when they were speaking English. And I grew up in the UK.
Yeah.
It's not an achievement that my British accent is this way. But I was in the verbal speaking exam, talking like my mother was the Queen of England.
Yeah.
And my colleague was talking in a very strong Cypriot accent.
Yes.
And I got an 8. He got a 9. And when I disputed this, she said, well, I thought you were a bit flat. And I was discriminated against. I need to have somebody, there needs to have been somebody at the board, at the school board, who I could go to and say, hey, see this person, they're discriminating against me because of who I am.
Yes.
And that person will have to have some kind of power, not just somebody who's sitting in the corner as a Turkish person, as a trophy Turk. Someone who has power to stop things, to change things, if they feel like there's some discrimination going on. This is not my utopia for Cyprus. Absolutely not. Just like my utopia for the world is not a world where women have to have positive discrimination. But until we have equality, and I have a lot to say about that issue, gender equality, especially after my leadership, because I think that Greek Cypriot men and Turkish Cypriot men are not in line with gender equal understandings. And that's the lightest and most politest way that I can put this. So my utopia for the world is not positive discrimination for women, and it's not positive discrimination for anybody based on their color, their ethnic, religious backgrounds, whatever. But the truth is, the discrimination exists. It's our reality, and we need to construct mechanisms to protect people until we are able to raise children who don't see the differences
or see beyond
the differences. I don't want children that don't see differences. I want children who embrace differences.
Okay. I have a final question for you. If you were a Greek Cypriot and you saw what is happening in Turkey these days with Imamoglu, would you trust Turkey to make a deal about Cyprus?
I'm a Turkish Cypriot and I don't trust Turkey. This is what we need to understand. As Cypriots, we need to understand that it's not a matter of trust of Turkey. It's a matter of taking our country out of the clasp of Turkey as a whole, right? As a Greek Cypriot, I would hate the fact that I have to show my ID to go to my father's village or my mother's village, right? And it's this that we need to change. If you're a Greek Cypriot that's happy with the status quo and happy with the fact that Turkey does have effective control over half of your country, then fine, continue the status quo. But if you want to remove it from the clasp of Turkey, then the key is to enhancing the peace process, convincing Turkish Cypriots that we are members of the same state, we should access the same rights, we live together equally, peacefully, without posing a threat to one another. So it's not a matter of, you don't need to trust Turkey to trust the solution. At the end of the day, I don't think that Turkey's priority is Cyprus. I really don't. I think Syria even is more important than Cyprus for Turkey at the moment.
But would Turkey accept to leave Cyprus altogether, not have any control over it?
I don't think listen, as long as Turkey is given something in return for taking a step back, which is what was going to happen from what I understand in Crans-Montana in terms of energy and using Cyprus as a route to, at the end of the day, the economy is an important catalyzer for any kind of motivation for anything. If Cypriots stand strong, Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, in what they want, and they give Turkey what they want in terms of these international positions over energy, all of these other issues, I don't think Turkey cares. I really don't think Turkey cares. As long as their interests are served, as long as we don't rock that boat, they don't care.
Okay. So the message I get from you generally is that the ROC needs to find ways to be more interactive with the Turkish Cypriot community, encourage Turkish Cypriots to participate, give them incentives, be in contact with them, and show its interest on all levels.
On gender, we don't have domestic violence legislation. The ROC has an effective domestic violence legislation. It could be better, but it has one. Invite Turkish Cypriot women's organizations as the Department of Gender Equality, which I'm very jealous of, by the way, as a Turkish Cypriot, that you have this department.
And like in the European elections for members of Parliament of the European Parliament, if would you be interested to be a candidate if 2 out of the 6 seats were given unilaterally by the Republic of Cyprus to Turkish Cypriots?
Absolutely.
Do you think that would help in any way?
Absolutely. It would give incentive for Turkish Cypriots. We tried so hard to bring people over to vote, but why should I vote? Who's going to take my voice to the European Parliament? And if they do, what are they going to do there?
And what are they going to say?
If this was what you said, if it was a scenario, then we could bring more people, more interactive, and then these people would be serving the interests of Cyprus, not Turkey.
Okay, Minemo, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was an honor that I met you.
Thank you for inviting me.
I had a very good time, and I think you are a remarkable person, and that you are very courageous. And your story is amazing, and I hope there were more people like you that pay some personal cost for their beliefs and for their dreams and so forth. I'm not very optimistic about the prospects in Cyprus.
Men never are.
Personally,
it's the women.
Is it a man?
It's the women
is it a gender
that
thing?
drive you. We can do it. It will change. Things will be better.
Yes, I hope
we
so.
We cannot leave it to your the male species.
Male species
motivations and hopes and desires.
Okay. Anyway, thank you. Thanks again, and I hope we have the opportunity to talk again in the future. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It was me, Atli. The podcast will be published tomorrow in audio form in Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I wish everybody a very nice weekend. Good night.